So, man, I hope you guys have done this, in November. I hope you've tackled the thing and started the thing that, like inside of each one of us, like God has created something unique and special inside of us that if you don't do it, it doesn't get done because there's only one of you and there's only one way that thing in your heart's ever going to get done, and that's if you completely and fully do it. And so, our prayer has been that this month has been a catalyst. In fact, that in the years to come, you'll look back and say, November 2015, I made some really important decisions and took some really important steps, and my future changed, and my kids' future changed, and my family's future changed, and the community was different because I did something. Potentially even, our state, the nation, the world potentially, because you made a decision to press through the thing that scares you. Now, over the course of the last several weeks, we've virtually memorized this line, right? This has been our line. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. Everything you want. Now, we've talked about this. We've given a lot of illustrations. Before you decided to ride a bike, before you learned to ride a bike, before you experienced the joy of riding a bike, you were scared. You were scared you were going to fall, and you did. You were scared you're going to get hurt, and you probably did. The same kind of thing happened before you asked that girl out or before you said yes to that guy or whatever the case was. There's probably a little bit of fear. You press through that fear and voila, next thing you know, you're married and have a ton of kids, right? I mean, there's any number of things that you are currently enjoying that before you enjoyed, there was fear. And you had to press through the fear to get to that thing, all right? So, when we first started this teaching series, in fact, it was the first week, I walked into the gym, and at our gym, we've got this big whiteboard, and people write things on it from time to time. And every once in a while, you'll find something brilliant written on there. And so on this particular Monday, I walked in, and this is what I saw written on the board. Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear, hashtag no fear November. Yes, I mean, that's great. That's like walking into the bathroom at a restaurant and seeing your church name written on the stall, right? Of course, I mean, we don't recommend that, but still, it'd be cool, right? So today we're going to continue this conversation about fear, but I want to talk about it from a little bit of a different angle. And the truth of the matter is, like in this life, you absolutely are going to have fear. Like it's just a part of life. The cool thing is that you get to choose what kind of fear, and you get to choose who it is that you fear. So we're actually going to look at a story. It was written by Matthew, who is one of Jesus' lead biographers. And he wrote this incredible story about Jesus. He told a story of a small team of men. They were huddled around their squad leader. They were learning about their mission. And they'd just been briefed about all the equipment that they had to go on this mission with. They had learned the geographical location in which they would be actually performing their mission. They'd been told the approach that they should take when dealing with the locals. All of this stuff. And then their leader, Jesus, said this in Matthew chapter 10, beginning in verse 16. This is what he says. Look, I'm going to send you out like sheep among wolves. So be shrewd as snakes and harmless as doves, but beware. You're going to be handed over to the courts, and you'll be flogged with whips in the synagogues. You're going to stand trial before governors and kings because you're my followers. He said, when you're arrested, don't worry about how to respond or what to say. God will give you the right words at the right time. He said a brother is going to betray his brother to death. A father will betray his own child, and children will rebel against their parents and cause them to be killed. And all nations are going to hate you because you're my followers. When you're persecuted in one town, you flee to the next. He's giving all of this descriptions to this team of people that are getting ready to set out and do this thing that they believe God has called them to do, this mission that they're setting out on, this goal that they're going to try to press on through and accomplish. And he says, look, there's going to be, like, you're going to be hated. You're probably going to be arrested. You're going to be beaten in religious institutions. Like, there's not a lot of things that are going to be good in the next coming weeks and months in your life. A lot of bad stuff's going to happen. Now, if I were sitting in that room, I'd have probably thrown him an eyebrow raise, right? The people's eyebrow. That would be appropriate. Like, what? Like, what are you thinking? Like, this doesn't make any sense, Jesus. Like, why would you send us out into that? So before we press on any farther, I just want to stop, and I think it's appropriate to say right now that sometimes people have this idea that lining up behind Jesus is a quick way to plush living. Sometimes if you listen to people talk, they get this idea that if I line up behind Jesus, everything goes good in my life, right? Like no more financial problems, no more marital problems, no more kid problems, no more health problems, no more. I mean, the Panthers are 11-0. Clearly somebody's following Jesus. Can I get a witness? But this story that we just read pretty much says otherwise. I mean, in essence, Jesus is saying, look, you're going to follow me, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you right out into the danger zone. Cue Kenny Loggins music, right? I mean, if you're really going to line up behind me, and you're really going to follow me, and you're really going to do what I tell you, you're going to be living in danger. There's going to be opportunity for fear all around you. I mean, it's not always going to be comfortable. You're headed into some crazy times. You're headed into some crazy places. There's going to be multiple encounters with hostile people. This is what Jesus is saying to these guys. And then he says this, but don't be afraid of those people who threaten you. Do not be afraid of those people who threaten you. Now, just remember what he just said to those people. Listen, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go out and you're going to live the life that I've called you to. You're going to tell people about me. You're going to live differently in a crazy world. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to be flogged with whips in the synagogue. Now, if you don't know, the synagogue was kind of like the church back in the day. In other words, Jesus is looking at his people and saying, genuine followers of Christ will be persecuted by religious people. By the way, that hasn't quit. There are still lots of churches who are filled up with angry, prosecuting, judgmental, mean-spirited people who call themselves Christians, who persecute genuine followers of Christ. I mean, that hasn't quit. If you follow Jesus and you legitimately live out the life that Christ has called you to, I just need to let you know right now that there's going to be opposition from the most surprising of quarters, the church. There will be people who don't understand, who criticize and judge and are hostile towards your efforts. Jesus said you're going to be taken to court. You'll be arrested. He said you'll be betrayed by family. And I just want to tell you this too. There are times in our lives when we decide and make a full-on decision to follow Jesus that people in our families don't understand. And there's opportunity for criticism and harshness and discouragement, et cetera, et cetera. And Jesus basically said, look, if you're going to be my follower, know this stuff is probably going to come. There's going to be an opportunity for fear. But here's what I want you to do. Don't be afraid of those people who threaten you. Now, I would just back up and say, he was speaking to these men, and he said, I'm calling you to do this. I've placed in you the skills and the abilities and the desires to do these things, and as you set out to do them, you're going to face opposition. Now, the same is absolutely true for every single person in this room. God has placed within every single person desires and passions and skill sets, and his desire and intention is that we actually engage those and use them for good in this world. And my promise is to you, just as Jesus promised to his squad of his team, he said you're going to face opposition. That's the same thing that's true for you. When you begin to align your skills and your passions and your desires and a full-out commitment to Jesus, there is going to be opposition. Now, here's the thing. The tendency is when we're facing opposition, now, most of us, quite frankly, are not going to be dragged into court or killed, right? But we probably will maybe face some opposition from some religious quarters. Maybe some family will be discouraging and harsh with their words and undermine our efforts. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe we will be persecuted. Maybe we will have to make decisions that move us from one location to the next. The point is this. Oftentimes, when we're making decisions, we're facing opposition, we make decisions based on fear of what people will do to us. In other words, like if I believe God has called me to start something or to build something or to write something or to speak to someone, but I'm a little bit scared of what this group of people might say, I don't do it because I'm scared of what they'll say to me or I'm scared of what they'll do to me. And that's a mistake. When I don't act because I'm scared of what other people might say to me, that's a really bad decision. There's a proverb that says this, Proverbs 29:25 says, fear of people is a dangerous trap. If you make your decisions in life, if you decide to do things or not do things out of fear for people, I promise, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go places where you don't want to go, and you're going to end up becoming the kind of person that you don't want to be, all because you're scared of the other people's opinions in your life. Jesus said, look, do not be afraid of those people who oppose you. Don't be afraid of them. And here's why. This is important. The time is coming when everything that is covered will be revealed, and all that is secret will be made known to all. Don't be afraid. Here's why. Because someday everything is going to be made known. Now, right now, one of the most feared groups of people in the world, does that just give it a shot? One of the most feared groups of people in the world right now is ISIS, absolutely. Like you say ISIS, people are like, oh, geez, so, I mean, some people hide, some people load up their AK, right? So like we've got all these different takes, but we all have a little bit of fear about ISIS. Now, just this week, there was an ISIS fighter that was captured. Did you guys see this on the news at all? He was captured by some Kurdish forces, and they got him in the back of a truck, and they started slapping him around and kicking him around, right? And this is what happened. This guy broke down and cried like a little boy. Now, think about this. This is ISIS. When you think of ISIS, this is a group of savages. They're beheading people. They're drowning people. They're blowing people up. They're kidnapping and raping innocent women and children. Like, these are savages that we live in this incredible fear of, but they caught this ISIS warrior, and it's documented that basically what was done to him was they slapped and kicked, and this was his response. The literal sentence they used was, he cried like a boy. And when I read this, I thought, probably every one of us in this room have lived in fear of someone that we saw as a monster. Like, they're invincible. They're just overwhelming. They're stronger, they're bigger, they're smarter, they're faster, they have more money, they're more savage, they're more relentless. The truth is, if we knew everything about them, we would fear them a lot less. Can I get a witness? If we knew everything about them, like when I see this joker crying, I'm not as scared. When I know that he cried because he got slapped around, I've been slapped around. And he cried. That reduces my fear. And that's, listen, I know this and you do too, but if we're not careful, when we face opposition from people that we don't fully know, we make bad decisions based on weak people because we're scared. We will make bad decisions based on weak people because we don't know everything about them. And that's why Jesus said, look, I do not want you to be afraid of those people who oppose you. I do not want you to be afraid of those people who antagonize you, who discourage you, who spit on your dream. Do not be afraid of them, because someday there's a time coming when everything that is covered will be revealed and all that is secret will be made known to all. In other words, someday you'll know everything about them. And when you know everything about them, you realize, my God, why was I so scared of them? Does that make sense? This is the word that you should embrace, right? Most of the people who oppose you are not strong enough to stop you. They're just loud. Don't be afraid of them. This is essentially what Jesus is saying to his followers, and by extension to us. Most of the people who oppose you are not strong enough to stop you. They're just loud. Do not be afraid of them. Do not stop doing the thing that God has created you to do because there's some loud people in your life. Don't be afraid of them. Just do what you set out to do. Do what God has created you to do. The thing that's in your heart that you keep thinking about, that you keep planning on doing someday, the thing that you think, I'll get around to it when there's less opposition or whatever, that's the thing that you've got to do. And you've got 1 week left to do it. And then Jesus really... So the disciples, and they're probably all sitting around like, all right, I get it. If somebody threatens me, don't be afraid. Because they're probably not as big and as bad and as ogreish as what they appear. They're probably just like that ISIS fighter, just a scared little boy, right? That's probably what, at the end of the day, when I know them fully, that's what I'll discover. And then Jesus took it to the next level. Look what he said. Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. Another people's eyebrow again, right? Like, what? Like, this is crazy. Of course, there's going to be some fear. If somebody says, if you do this, I'm going to kill you. Now, quite frankly, most of us in our lifetimes are not going to face that level of opposition. Most of us in our lifetime are not going to face a level of opposition which says, if you go through with this dream, I'm going to kill you. However, there are people in this country, by the way, who have died because of their commitment to an idea. Their commitment to, in this particular instance, commitment to the person of Jesus Christ. On Friday, just a couple of months ago, Friday, October 2nd, there were 10 people in Oregon at a small community college Umpqua Community College that died for their faith. I want to show you. They ranged in age from 18 to 67. This is what CNN wrote about them. They said the gunman who opened fire at Oregon's Umpqua Community College targeted Christians specifically, according to the father of one of the wounded students. Before going into surgery, this student told her father that he entered the classroom firing. Immediately, the professor was shot point blank, dead. The gunman then everyone dropped to the ground, right? The gunman runs out of ammo, begins to reload his bullets, his gun. While reloading his handgun, he ordered those who were Christians to stand up. This is what he said. If you're a Christian, stand up. And they began to stand. And then he said, good, because you're a Christian, you're going to see God in just about 1 second. And then he shot them and killed them. 10 of them. Now, there are very few of us in this room who will ever be killed because of our commitment to an idea or our commitment to our religion or our commitment to our faith. But these are 10 who look like us, who are essentially our neighbors, who said, I am so fully and thoroughly committed to the idea of Jesus, to the person of Jesus, that even when threatened with death, I will stand up. Jesus said, don't fear those who will kill your body. My guess is that probably at least most of these people knew the second sentence. Jesus said, don't be afraid of those who can kill your body because they cannot touch your soul. Now, there's a side of me that's like, yeah, but you're dead, right? You're dead now. So, what's the soul all about? Well, a long time ago in World War II, there was a gentleman named Viktor Frankl. He was a Jewish psychologist. He was captured and put into a prison camp. And while there, he watched his colleagues die. The majority of his colleagues died. But along the way, as he watched these men and women face suffering and face the threat of death, and he watched them face this, something began to happen inside of him, and he began to realize, they can hurt my body, they can lock me up, they can harm my body, but there's one thing that they can never do to me. Look what he said. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. The last of human freedoms, which is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. You can kill my body, but you can't take my soul. You cannot deny me the ability to make a decision. Essentially, Jesus is looking at his followers and to us and saying, listen, people may ultimately even hurt your body. They may take things from you. But don't be afraid of that, because the one thing they can't take from you is the thing that's deep, deep inside. I don't know if you guys know, but this have you been following this story in Indiana? This guy was actually a pastor in Anderson, South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, moved to Indiana to start a church. Just happened a couple weeks ago. While he was at the gym, 3 young men broke into his house, killed his pregnant wife. You following this? It's crazy. They found the guys. You know what this young pastor's on the news saying? He's saying, I choose to forgive these men. It's insane. It's crazy. Basically they came into his house and they took everything that was important to him. They took everything that was special to him. And yet at the end of the day, he stands up and says, the one thing you cannot take from me is my decision. I have the courage to make a decision that's bigger than these circumstances. I will not be played down. I will not be suppressed. I will not be sat on by these circumstances. I will have courage to make the kind of a decision that I believe my God would call me to make. Essentially, Jesus is saying this to us. No matter where you find yourselves, whether it's just verbal opposition or physical opposition, don't be afraid. Now, he then said something else, which he's just gone on this rampage. Don't be afraid of anyone. If they threaten you, don't be afraid of them. If they even threaten to kill you, don't be afraid of them. Do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And then he said, fear only God, because God can completely destroy you. You shouldn't fear anyone in this world, but you should fear one person, God. So all my life growing up, I've heard we should fear God. And so, as a kid, I thought, what, am I supposed to be scared of God? Boo, right? That was good. So, like, am I supposed to be scared of God? What does that look like? I'm supposed to love God and worship God and say, but I'm supposed to be scared of him. That doesn't make any sense to me. So Erik Weihenmayer is a blind mountain climber, and he wrote an autobiography called Touch the Top of the World. And he has helped me to get my mind around what it means to have fear for God. This, let me just give you perspective. This is Mount Everest. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this, but right here, there's some climbers. So you probably can't see this too far back, right? There's climbers that are up on. Let me give you perspective. The summit of Mount Everest is 29,029 feet, all right? That's the summit, the highest point for which these climbers, this blind man, Erik Weihenmayer, climbed. Just for perspective, cruising altitude for a jet, a commercial jet, right? Like Southern Air, what is it? Help me. Southwest, yeah, Southern Air. That's a good company right there. So cruising altitude for a commercial jet is anywhere between 25 and 40,000 feet. Okay? The summit of Mount Everest is 29,000 feet. So basically, when Erik and his team climbed to the top of Mount Everest, had they been in any other environment, they might have been hit by a plane. That's how high they were. This dude's blind, right? It's crazy. Great book, by the way. I'd encourage you to read it. This is what he says in his book. He said, I laugh at the phrase, often used in mountain climbing literature, conquering the mountain. You've heard people say it, right? I'm going to conquer the mountain, right? He says, in a head-to-head fight, the mountain will far outmatch the strongest climber. Like, you're not going to conquer the mountain, dude. It's way bigger than you are. And then he quotes his friend and climbing partner, Chris Morris, who says this, the best you can hope for is to sneak to the summit when the mountain blinks. The mountain's powerful. It's huge. It must be respected by all. The best that you can do is hope that the mountain will accommodate you and allow you passage to the very highest point. Literally, these guys will spend weeks getting to a point where they can make that last quarter of a mile run to the summit. And they may have to come back down and sit for a few weeks until the mountain accommodates them and allows them passage to the top. They cannot sit at the bottom and say, we're going to go up to the top and be back down in 14 days. They don't know that you cannot conquer the mountain. The best that you can hope to do is sneak in when the mountain blinks. And then Erik writes this, that's what I like about the mountains. It's a realm where humans haven't reached godlike status, a realm that demands humility. Human frailty is amplified, human ambition is nullified. In other words, it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much experience you have, how strong you are, how many Instagram followers you have. None of that matters. When you stand at the mountain is greater than you are. And when I think about God, I think I think he's like the mountain, right? He's daunting. He's huge. He cannot be bullied. He's never outmaneuvered. He's never paid off, so he wouldn't do well in politics. He's not afraid. He's not prone to compromise. It will always be his way. And Jesus said, look, this is our God. Do not be afraid of people who antagonize you or oppose you. Because if you really knew the truth about them, you'd realize they're not as tough as what they present. Don't be afraid of them. What you should do is be afraid of God. Because he's big and he's powerful and he's more resourceful and it will always be his way. And then in the very next sentence, are you here? This is important. Be afraid of God. And the very next sentence is what Jesus says. What is the price of 2 sparrows? 1 copper coin? Like if I were to go to just buy a couple small crappy birds, right? Copper coin. It's just a cheap little bird, right? I don't know where that fit in. But he says, look, but not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it. Like these are just throwaway birds, like sparrows. They're trash birds. But nothing happens to them without your Father, God, knowing about it. And then look what he said. The very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You're more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. Listen to what he said. Be afraid of God. But then he said, I want you to know this about God. He knows everything about you, and he really likes you. Be afraid of him, he really thinks you're valuable. And so as I'm reading this, all of a sudden I realize that, look, in life, you get to choose who you will submit to. You get to submit to the loud voices who don't know you or care about you. Or you get to submit to the strong God who both knows and cares about you. Now, I would guess there are some people in this room right now that are making decisions based on the fears they have of other people. You haven't started that thing. You haven't said it. You haven't done it. You haven't gone there. You haven't made plans for because you're scared of what someone else might say. Those are the loud voices who don't fully know you and who don't really care about you. But the one who fully knows you and fully cares about you says, listen, you're tremendously valuable to me. Stop being afraid of those people and start fearing me. Live the life that I've created you to live. Live the life that I've carved out for you. And see, when you make that choice will absolutely shape your life. Will I submit to those loud voices who don't know me or care about me? Or will I submit to this incredibly strong God who knows me and values me? So Daniel Goleman is an author. He's written a number of books, but he wrote a book back in the mid-'80s called Vital Lies, Simple Truths. And in this book, he talks about fear and stress. And he gives us an incredible example. He talks about a cable car in Poland's Tatra Mountains. Now, just for perspective, I wanted to show you what this looks like. This is a cable car. And basically what happens is this cable car goes down into the valley and picks people up and takes them up to the peak of the mountains. Now, I'm just looking at that, I'm a little breathless. That's incredibly high on what seems like a very small cable. Now, let me read to you what he writes. He said, a tiny cable car wobbles swiftly over the steep ravines leading up to a peak in Poland's Tatra Mountains. This is that. Inside, a dozen people, holy crap, a dozen people in that thing? They're all packed tightly, including a traveler who describes the various reactions. So one of the people who's riding in this cable car actually noted the various reactions of the individuals within the car. This is what he said. To the old Polish grandmothers with babushkas on their heads, it seems like just another weekend distraction. Been there, done that. To the 3 or 4 young children in the car, it is high adventure. Like, this is amazing. Wow, look out the window. Like, oh. To my wife, who shudders even at a tram ride to Roosevelt Island in New York City, it's very nearly heart-stopping. To the conductor, of course, it's all too familiar even to pay attention. He sits by a terrifyingly open window and reads his newspaper. Same event, 4 completely different experiences, 4 completely different perspectives on the same event. Now, Goleman looks at this and he goes on and he quotes a professor from Berkeley University called Richard Lazarus, and this is what he says. There's these people in this cable car, right? They're all having different perspectives on the same event, and this is what he says. Stress occurs when the demands of the environment in a person's eyes exceed his resources. Stress occurs when the demands of an environment in a person's eyes exceed his resources. Now, right now, some of you in this room are facing stress, fear, because someone in your life is opposing you. Someone in your life is discouraging you. Someone is saying you can't. Someone is saying you shouldn't. Someone has already said you won't. Maybe they're threatening in some way. And you look at the situation, you're like, I don't have a lot of resources. I don't have a lot of options. And you may believe that you don't have inside of you to stand up, and now you're getting ready to make this decision. Will you submit to the loud voices who say you can't? Or will you submit to the one who says you can, and I have all the resources that you need? I have all the resources that you need. If you're getting ready to submit to the loud voices, can I just say, don't? Jesus said, don't fear those who oppose you. Don't fear those who discourage you. Don't fear those who threaten you, even with death. He said, your Father in heaven is for you. He knows you. He believes in you. You're valuable to him. Fear him. Now, there's a letter later on in the Bible that was written to people who were actually being oppressed physically and socially and economically, just in any number of ways. It was written it's called the letter to Hebrews. It's in our Bible. And this is what it says. God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. So we can say with confidence, read this with me, please. The Lord is my helper, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me? Like if God says I'm with you, all of a sudden I realize I have all the resources I need and my fear goes down, my stress goes down. The cable car ride isn't such a big deal after all because I know the conductor, I know the guy who built the car, I know the guy who checks the cables. Like all of a sudden this isn't such a big deal because God is with me. I would just, this morning as your pastor and as your friend, I would want to say this to you. Stop living with other people's fears and other people's oppressions as your own. Like they're scared, so you don't. They oppose you, so you don't. They discourage you, so you don't. Don't take their fears. Don't allow their fears to control the decisions that you make. This is what Jesus says. I mean, you can live with the fear of disappointing that person, or you can live with the fear of disappointing your God. You can live with the fear of angering that person, or you can live with the fear of angering your God. You can live with the fear of being disconnected from them or disconnected from Him. It's your choice. You get to choose who you will submit to. The loudest voice who neither knows you nor cares about you, or God, who both knows you and cares deeply for you and has all the resources that you need. Now, one more time, Eric Weinmeier. By the way, great book. Strongly encourage you to get it. Encouraging, exciting read. He was getting ready to climb Mount Everest, and lots of opposition. Like people are like, Eric, you should not do this. And this is what he said. This pattern continued with expert after expert telling me I would never be able to surmount each new challenge. But I pushed on, even though I often staggered beneath their pessimism, feeling like I was being buried under a mountain of you can't. Like all these professionals and the experts are saying, Eric, you can't do this. Dude, you're blind. You can't do this. But this time, maybe they were right. He's getting ready to climb Mount Everest, and he's like, maybe they're right. Maybe I can't. Perhaps I'd finally gone too far. Yet there was still a chance that, as before, they were wrong. Those experts could probably demonstrate a dozen different climbing knots and a dozen more pulley systems to drag an injured climber from a slot. If you asked them to describe the South Col, they could map out the route inch by inch through the Khumbu ice falls past the Geneva spur to the Hillary Step. There was no arguing the point that they knew a lot about climbing and they knew a lot about Mount Everest. These people knew what they were talking about. But look what he says. But they didn't know a thing about me. Listen, don't read any further on this, okay? Hold on, this is important. There's going to be people in your life who say, you can't. And they may know a lot about the thing that they're talking about, but they don't know a lot about you. They don't know the God who lives in you. They don't know the God who created you. They don't know the God who's empowered you. So they may be able to say with a fair amount of authority, like it's not possible for you to do this, but what they don't know is the game changer. Eric said, they didn't know a thing about me. People's expectations had a way of turning into boundaries. In other words, if they said I can't, then I can't. So I decided to God, this makes me want to yell and scream and get fired up. So, read this with me, right? So I decided to throw the world's expectations in the garbage and go to see Everest for myself. Some of you in this room need to throw some people's expectations in the garbage. Because you've let their fear, you've let their opposition, you've let their opinions keep you from doing the thing that God created you and called you to do for a long time. You can live the rest of your life cowering and hiding from them and not doing the thing that God called you to do, or you can step out, throw those expectations away, and do the thing that God is calling you to do simply by saying, I'm not afraid of them any longer. I'm not going to live in fear of what they think or what they say. I was made to climb this mountain. I was made to do this thing. And the one who called me and created me to do it will be disappointed if I don't, and I don't want to disappoint him. I have a big, strong, tough friend. And he tells me, he just told me again this week, he's like, I'm not scared of anything. Well, he said, there is one thing in the world that I'm scared of, and she's 5'2" and blonde. He said, I'm scared of my wife. He said, I don't want to disappoint her. I don't want to let her down. He said, I'm not scared of any man. I'm not scared of any animal. I'm not scared, but I'm scared of her. I don't want to disappoint her. And see, you're an adult. You're a big person, right? You have the choice. Who will you live in fear of? Who do you choose to let down? Who do you choose to disappoint? Who do you choose to submit to? Some of you in the room need to make a decision, and it looks like this. Who am I going to submit to? The loud voices or God? If you're afraid of the loud voices, welcome to the rest of your life. You're going to die old and disappointed with regrets. But if you choose today, or at some point in the near future, to say, I'm going to stop living afraid of what they say and afraid of what they think, and I'm going to submit my life to God and let the one who values me and knows me call the shots in my life. That's a big deal. Now, I want to pray for us. Before I do, I want to actually read you the journal entry of a man who chose the fear of God. And as I do, I want our team to get ready. We're going to wrap up today with a song that kind of talks about this whole idea of God with us. Here's Psalm 112 from David. How joyful are those who fear the Lord and delight in obeying his commands. So do what God said. Their children will be successful everywhere. An entire generation of godly people will be blessed because they weren't scared of what other people thought. They themselves will be wealthy, and their good deeds will last forever. Light shines in the darkness for the godly. They're generous, compassionate, and righteous. Good comes to those who lend money generously and conduct their business fairly. They're not scared what other people say or think. Such people will not be overcome by evil. Those who are righteous will be long remembered. They do not fear bad news. They confidently trust the Lord to care for them. They're confident and fearless and can face their foes triumphantly. They share freely and give generously to those in need. Their good deeds will be remembered forever. They will have influence and honor. The wicked will see this and be infuriated. They will grind their teeth in anger, slink away, their hopes thwarted. In other words, we tried to keep him from doing it. We tried to discourage her and keep her from doing it, but she didn't live in fear. She pressed on and did the thing that we all thought she couldn't do. Now here's our prayer today. That you will make a decision. You're going to live in fear of someone. Our prayer is that you will make a decision. I'm going to live my life with the fear of the Lord rather than the fear of man. I will choose to live in this world fearing no one but God. That decision will absolutely change your future. It will change your family. It changes everything. I pray to God that you'll begin to consider this decision. Father, in this world we live with fear. And there's so many times, God, that we've not done things, or we've not begun projects, or we've said no to things we really wanted to say yes to because we were afraid of other people. We were afraid of their opinions. We were afraid of what they thought of us. Jesus comes along and says, don't do that. Do not live your life afraid of others, what they think, what they say, what they may do. Instead, fear only one. Fear only God. God, if every single one of us in this room decided today to live with that kind of courage, I'm not afraid of anyone or anything. I'm just afraid of God. I'm afraid of disappointing the one who knows me and loves me and created me. I'm afraid of letting him down, the one who knows me and loves me and created me. And regardless of what others think about me, I'm just going to do the things that God has created me and called me to do. I will live with fear only for him and courage in every other environment. Father, would you help us to make decisions based out of that context? I pray, Father, as we begin to process this, that you would help us, forgive us for living in fear. All of the good things that could have been done that haven't been done because we've been scared. Would you give us a second chance at these days, Father? Help us to live with courage. In Christ's name. As we sing these words to you, Lord, may courage rise up in our hearts in Jesus' name. Amen.